Alright, so here we are. We're at the point where it's been a week since the release of The Edge of Fate, and yeah, I would say that there are certainly places where it succeeds, but honestly there are a lot more places where it fails, at least for now. And that's a bit of the difficulty with how the new system is structured, but we're gonna break everything down and try to answer the question of whether or not you should buy this expansion if you're looking to scratch that Destiny 2 itch. Now, first of all, I have to say, if you've played Destiny and you're outside looking in, we're just gonna start with the best thing about this expansion, and then I'll get to the critiques. So this is a spoiler-free review, so I'm not going to say anything specific about the story because, again, I do want to save that for anyone who's looking to actually play the expansion. But I would have to say it's one of the best narrative stories we've ever had in Destiny 2. Of course, there are a ton of good campaigns. I would probably say top 3 is maybe Forsaken, Final Shape, and then, at least for me personally, Edge of Fate would come in 3rd or maybe 4th, because Red War was also really good. But there's a lot of nostalgia baked in there, and I really do think, at least again for me personally, that this campaign is up there. And again, this is a new DLC and a new saga, so there's a lot of build up. There's not really that big moment, like that Thanos fight moment that you're gonna see. And so I do think that's why you've seen the steep drop off in players, which sucks because, again, Final Shape was, it was, I think, a little bit more than average story, which we needed that to finish the story in general. And this is a step above that, which is so fantastic to see. When you go through the campaign, you can understand everything that's happening. You don't necessarily have to run it again, although there are a lot of moving parts. So a second playthrough isn't the worst idea, although you could just go back and watch the cutscenes, which is something I did a little bit, although hearing the dialogue in between does give you the context and whatnot for what is happening, and that's really important. And there aren't the particular tropes that you expect with a D2 campaign. It really cuts away from that, and Lodi, who of course has gotten a lot of attention, really breathes some fresh air into a roster, or cast rather, that really needs it. The more new characters we get, the better, because I think that's part of the franchise fatigue, is that we've been seeing these characters grow for a long time. And it's a good thing. You see them develop, you care about them, so when something happens to them, good or bad, you are connected to them. So that happened with Zavala in the Final Shape, and of course when Amanda Holiday died, and all that. There is quite a bit of great stuff in the story, but again, I won't talk too much about that. So stay tuned to that. If you're looking to play through the story, you could always just watch a Bife video on the raid after if you don't complete the raid in some way, shape, or form. But I highly recommend doing the raid. It's pretty fun. We'll get to that in a little bit. All right, so now it's time to critique, because there's a ton of critique. And it starts with the portal. So there was this whole debacle when the portal first released. The best way to grind was to do the exotic mission encore. I think it was dropping up to 4 completion rewards, and that was the best way to grind. Why? Because you could get 4 pieces of gear every time you did it. That means you're getting 4 gear. It's basically like a Jet 2 holiday when it's 50 pounds per person. That's 200 pounds for a family of 4, by the way. It was just such a good deal that you couldn't pass it up. So of course you're going to do that. And then right before the raid race was going to happen, right, you have all these content creators and streamers and whatnot grinding for gear, and they remove it just like that. And they do eventually bring it back. I'm not sure if it was Thursday or late Friday or something along those lines, but they knocked down the rewards to 3, and they also made it impossible to speedrun, at least with certain modifiers. There's a new modifier system, which we'll get into in a little bit, but you could have a grapple and all that, so you could speedrun it. And I mean, people just ended up speedrunning it anyway, and it was still the best way to grind for power level. And we're just gonna do a little. We're gonna look at the portal here, so you can see now Encore is gone again. I guess they're tweaking it for a second time, but you can see here I have a bonus drop as well as 2 completion rewards for Cal's Fall, and this would probably be the best thing for me to do right now. You can see how Starcrossed and Whisper have drops as well, but something that really irks me a little bit is you do see a bit of a time difference with some of these. Like Whisper is definitely the shortest of the 3 exotic missions here. So of course you just get 1 reward because you can run it faster. It's 25 to 30 minutes for both Kel's Fall and Starcrossed. So you do get a little bit more. And the place that you get these bonus drops from is actually over here. The new menu does have me a little confused. But you do these daily challenges each day. You will get the bonus. As you can see there, certain operations have a bonus focus each day. Your first B grade score completion guarantees the reward, and so on. So, you know, there is a bit of that, and sometimes it'll have a featured item. I did comp earlier on my Titan, and I didn't get a class item, which was really frustrating, so I felt a little, I felt lied to because it says it's a potential bonus reward, and I did get the bonus, but for some reason I guess I wasn't good enough to get the extra bonus focus, so that's cool. And you know, you can see here as well, it's usually about 10 to 15 minutes for some of these missions as well, and sometimes you'll have more completion rewards. It does seem like maybe they're weeding it out a little bit more. You can see the Technocrat is a really good one for me to do right now because I'm getting 3 bonus drops, so why would I bother with any of these except maybe Onslaught, because you know that takes 30 minutes, by the way, and this takes 10 to 15. I can get 4 drops if I complete it with the bonus, and then if I do, you know, Onslaught, I'm doing 35 minutes of work for the same amount of rewards, in fact less rewards, so that doesn't make sense. And you know, you can customize it, so we can go to the customization screen here, but there's a problem with this. So I always put a locked equipment on because I'm usually pretty confident in my build. Sometimes it bites me, but you know, I'm like, okay, I have my build, everything's set. I look at the modifiers, make sure it's matching. So I'm just gonna go balls to the wall here, right? I'm gonna put all the crazy modifiers on. I'm gonna make this super duper hard, and then we'll go and we'll see. So it's 270 power right now. I'm 223, so I'd probably get absolutely destroyed if I tried to do this. But my max reward here is gonna be 229. Now, if I take some of these harder modifiers off, see, it's still at 229. Still at 229. You see the difference here? It's now down to 230 combatant power. I'm still getting the same level of gear to drop. And this doesn't affect the quantity in the way that you think it would, right? I have this on. Even if I pop the no HUD on, it doesn't budge it up anymore. So why would I bother having all these modifiers on, right? When I can take this double solar thread off, I can take the Banes off, and I can even take this off, right? I can get it all the way down to easy and still get 229s to drop. Now, I don't know if this is bugged and maybe it's supposed to go higher, but again, why is anyone gonna bother increasing the difficulty if it doesn't get you a better reward? You can just speedrun this and you're done. And as I mentioned with the Technocrat versus Onslaught, I'm getting more rewards in less time for less work, and it sucks. The rewards should scale to both the difficulty and the time it takes you. Like, let's say for this Onslaught, expected time 35 minutes. Say I completed in 20 minutes, I should get bonus rewards. I don't think that's a thing for this, but that's something that should definitely be the case. And of course, I'm locked out of Master, which would drop higher tier gear more often. But because I'm so low right now, you have to be 270, I'm only 223. So I am locked out of doing higher difficulty content to get higher rewards. And even in the difficulty that I can do, if I juice up everything, I'm still, as I showed, only going to get a certain level of gear regardless. So that's all I wanted to show for that. When we talk about the grind for people who are in the raid race or aspiring to at least attempt the raid race, the fact that they removed Encore and it took away that advantage for some people who maybe were saving it for another day, or whatever the case may be, it sucked, right? You want people to play your game even if they find an exploit, and Bungie was like, they're doing it too fast. They're getting too high too fast. We need to cut them down, and that's exactly what they did. And instead of keeping it fair, leaving it enabled with the juiced up rewards until the raid race happened, then you take it down, then you slow down the rewards a little bit, whatever. But they didn't do that. And I just have to say, watching the raid race and personally trying to get ready to attempt contests, I didn't have the ambition, neither did my team, of finishing it, but we wanted to try it, right? Getting ready for that was so stressful because everything is different now. Your stats, weapons are different, all the numbers are scaled differently, contest is harder now. And when you couple all of that together with the fact that this raid race was only moved a day back from when we usually have these raid races, for Final Shape we had it the Friday following the release of the expansion because it was tied in with the story and they didn't want to wait too long to loop in everything with Excision as well. But with this, the story isn't one-to-one. I mean, it is connected, which, small spoiler, sorry about that, but, usually these raids are loosely connected to what's happening in the expansion. But it certainly didn't need to drop Saturday right after the release of the expansion, especially with everything changing. It would have been so advantageous for everybody to have a week to grind to get every single character up, because what can you do at that point? You can switch characters if you need to, you have builds set up, you have all the gear you need. Of course, the professionals did everything they needed to get ready for this race, and that's great. I'm sure people like Team Parabellum and so on were ready to go. But even some of the raid racers, complained about not being able to get ready, and if they're complaining, then that's a bit of an issue. You might say, oh, well, they wanted the grind, they asked for this. It isn't so much that the grind is too much, it's just not enough time given how this system works and what I just showed, how you can't do the most difficult content to get the best gear right away. You have to grind your way up, and certain tiers are locked on behind your Guardian rank. You can't get certain tiers of gear which are better, they have higher stats, and they have enhanced traits with weapons and so on, and you couldn't do that right away. So you had to grind, not necessarily for the power but for the gear, and again, that was a little soft locked. And the reason why the power grind shouldn't have been too important in the first place is because you're capped at 100 power anyways for the raid race, so it doesn't matter. Once you get to 100, anything above that is pointless, which is why the power grind shouldn't matter. Make everything scale to your fire team power, as in how many people you're with. If you're solo, things aren't as tanky, and if you're playing in a fire team, things might be a little bit more beefy. Now we can talk about the gameplay in the campaign real quick, just to go back to the story and get away from raid stuff and the grind. Personally, I didn't mind Matter Spark and Matter Morph as well as the Relocator. That was just my opinion. You're slowly introduced to each mechanic, and by the end of the campaign, you're using all three to solve puzzles. I think motion sickness aside, they were fine. I think the sentiment around them was mostly negative, and I get it. For some people, they just want to shoot stuff. Maybe it was just hard to find out when you needed to do a certain thing, and I will say that they really wanted you to figure it out yourself. But I kind of enjoy that, and some people don't, so I understand that. The missions could get stale as far as the gameplay went. It was really similar for the most part. There were a lot of shanks in one mission. Sorry, that's a spoiler, but one of the most fascinating things, and this is a small spoiler if you want to skip ahead, but you can interact with the Ionians, and it's a really cool thing. They have their own language. They're just kind of yapping at you while you're reading the text that they're spewing. And I wish we had this level of interaction with the citizens of the planet as we did on Kepler with Neomuna, because the little digitized humanoid looking things are Neomuni citizens. You don't really interact with them too much. There are the ones in the Lost Sector that you do talk to. The guy who runs the arcade, I think it was Sam or something. Of course, there's Jisoo Colorado, I think that's his name. But the aesthetic of Kepler for me, it felt very samey. It felt like the Tangled Shore mixed together with Europa a little bit because of all the fallen architecture. And it didn't really feel like a new destination. It felt like new-ish. And I still think there are some cool parts of it that a lot of people will like. But for me personally, it felt a little too drab and not really exciting. Not as exciting as Neomuna is or the Pale Heart. Again, that's just a me thing. Now, when we get to the difficulties, right? oh boy. Legendary campaign was a walk in the park. It was not hard at all. I don't think my fire team on day one got stuck on anything. I don't even think we hard wiped, which usually happens at least once in a legendary campaign. It felt so easy. Fabled was about a tick up above that. It wasn't too bad. Obviously a little bit harder, but not crazy. But the jump between Fabled and Mythic is insane. So third iteration, the new Battle Pass exotic Void Scout Rifle, it was bugged at launch, right? And that was basically the only way to complete Mythic encounters in a reasonable time. Every single boss you encounter is super beefy, and I'm not talking like, oh, they take, you know, a couple rounds of a GL or from 3 different people. I'm talking, you're gonna use your special, your heavy, and you're gonna sit there for probably 10 minutes plonking away with your scout, or probably Outbreak now. That's probably one of the better options. But it is the definition of a bullet sponge. Oh, and yeah, if one of the missions you do isn't a time lapse mission, you will not get rewards from these mythic missions. You do unlock an emblem and access to a new set of armor with a set bonus, so that's okay, but you should be getting powerful drops while you're doing the hardest form of the campaign. That should have been the best way to level up, because before we had Encore, we had the Legendary Campaign, which is definitely the best way to get your character from the power that you start at the expansion, which is 10, to 100. But after that, the campaign isn't great. So ideally what you were doing day one was doing the Legendary Campaign on all of your characters. But the campaign is long, and that's another reason why a lot of people didn't have the time to grind it. It took, I think, 10 hours for me and my fire team to do the whole campaign, and that's with a break in between. And so that's 10 hours. You're usually only awake for 12, 14 hours in a day, maybe a little bit longer than that. But what are we doing? What are we doing? Mythic should be toned down a bit. I think one of my friends said maybe it's not scaling properly. It's scaling to 3 people as opposed to scaling to 1 person. So when you're solo, it's especially bad. So you're going to want to bring a fire team for Mythic. Maybe use Fire Team Finder in-game to solve that. And that could be a bug, I don't know. But man, speaking of bugs, that's our next topic. Yeah, so I made a video a little while back about how a lot of the known issues inside of the D2's that are released are known issues. They date back for a very long time. And in that video, I expressed how much I feared that even with the Edge of Fate coming out, some of these bugs were not going to get fixed, and we're going to get more bugs that will be put on the back burner. There are really, really bad ones that are literally game-breaking that need to be addressed. And for the first time ever, Bungie did address this via the Destiny 2 team, and thank God. And, you know, an example of some of those bugs are your PC will crash after a certain amount of time if you have a certain GPU. I believe it's the 30 series, and there's no way to stop this crashing your PC. You can put a timer up so that you know when to restart your game, but you shouldn't have to do that, especially because it's some people can't change what graphics card they have on a dime. I mean, maybe you can downgrade it to avoid the crash, but you shouldn't have to do that. And a lot of these cropped up during the raid race, which made it even worse. And one of those, of course, is rally banners not working at all. Sometimes in Pantheon, it would just be your super wouldn't come back, or your melee, or your ammo, or whatever. It was a mix of that. And so to fix that, you have to go to orbit and come back. And of course, during a raid race, that is precious minutes and time lost, learning mechanics, doing damage, or whatever. And some of these bugs are still prevalent. I was doing a normal run, and we had to go to orbit, and it's just frustrating. If you are sliding too much while you're sprinting, you will sometimes just stop sprinting in general, so you're walking around, and I don't know about you, but when you're walking, you look like a big target, and every single ad in the vicinity or boss is gonna light you up like a soccer mom's porch during Christmas. It's Jover for you. Something that annoys me, I played one PvP match today. I've played 2 since Edge of Fate came out. I used to be a big PvP player, not so much anymore. And one of the reasons I don't is because no regs happen all the time. What is a no reg, you might ask? When you melee someone or something, it can happen sometimes in PvE, but it mostly happens in PvP. But the melee won't register. So if I go to shotgun melee someone and I'm pre-pressing the melee button because I know I'm far away enough that I'm not going to get the kill with a shotgun, then it just doesn't count, right? I'm not getting the kill, and that's that. And we add in the fact that the new stat system isn't balanced the way it should be. Bungie told us that when the system came out, or maybe a little bit before, 70 would be the new 100. So 100 from the old stats was 70 with the new stats. Turns out that isn't true, and it's not quite there. So that might have been another reason why some teams were struggling. Maybe they had lower stats on 70, whatever. That's just another small thing, but these all come together to make everything super frustrating. There was a bug as well on the final boss of Desert Perpetual that prevented Team Parabellum, which was the team that won Salvation's Edge World's First. They were doing really well on the final boss. They were getting so close to clearing, and they had a bug that soft locked them, which means they couldn't complete the raid. Even when they were re-instancing or someone was leaving, it would stay with them because they weren't aware of the bug until after the fact. So they lost a raid race because of a bug, and it got so frustrating for them that they just gave up. And you could say skill issue, they shouldn't have given up, or they should have realized there was a bug in re-instance. But would you have done that? Tensions are high, it gets frustrating and all that. And loadout swapping was also really prevalent, and I'm sure a lot of people have already pointed attention to the fact that Bungie seemed very anti-loadout swapping, and it was almost required, basically borderline impossible to complete this raid without loadout swapping. And that makes people think that maybe there was something wrong with the stats or with the scaling and whatnot that forced people to have to swap. There was a lot of Thunderlord to Lord of Wolves swapping in order to kill the final boss, and it's very likely that without that it wouldn't have happened. I know that the QA team that is there at Bungie is probably trying their best, and I salute them for all the work they've done just keeping the game up and running and playable. Because another thing to bring up, and I could go on for days with the bugs and whatnot, but there's a lot of old raids that are unplayable as well, crashing your game, certain encounters aren't working, or certain mechanics aren't working that soft lock you. It's getting worse by the day, and it happens with every major or even sometimes minor release, like an event. I don't know how we fix this. Is it a D3? Is it a week-long maintenance? I don't know what the solution is. Good news, and I hope Bungie comes through with this, or whoever needs to do it. The Destiny 2 team account said that they would look to be a little bit more transparent by making a podcast or a blog post or something along those lines. I'll leave the tweet up here for you to read. And I think for everyone involved, this would be a great way to figure out, is Bungie's QA team actually understaffed? Are these bugs really hard to solve with the old engine and the old system? Is it more of a technical issue? Do some of the bugs that are more serious take a longer time because there's so much stuff in the sandbox and in the game that when you introduce something new, it can break everything. And this is yet another reason why the raid race should have been delayed a week, is because all of these bugs did end up preventing some teams from clearing and made things harder to clear, and so on. Obviously, even if they had waited a week, the race still wouldn't have been perfect, but it would have been potentially better. I can't say that for certain, but we can assume. I have to start the conclusion here with something positive, okay? Because I said a lot of, not really negative things, but harsh critiques, because I do truly love this game. It's a cliche, we critique because we love. So to answer the question, should you play this expansion? If you're looking for a good story, yes, 100%. The price point might be a little bit much for a good story. The campaign is maybe long enough for you to consider it. I would say campaign plus the side quest, you're probably looking at 15, maybe 20 hours. I wouldn't go much beyond that, maybe even less than that. So there's not much there, but if you do the raid, that might be an extra couple of hours there. So you might get your bang for your buck if you enjoy the power grind, but again, the power grind right now isn't that good. And really, what I would say for someone who doesn't play the game as much, I would honestly wait. They're adding more stuff to the portal for variety. They're probably going to listen to some of the feedback that I'm giving here as well as other people are giving and fix some stuff, and that's why I do what I do. Is I want our voices to be heard, and there's so many voices out there that once everyone gets on the same page, Bungie has to do something, and that's why I do recommend waiting. So the portal grind will be better, the raid might be a little bit easier or more friendly. Of course, you can actually make the raid harder with the same system I was displaying earlier, and when you do make it harder, it actually does scale the rewards, which is a crazy concept, right? And I do enjoy that, so that'll be fun to do. But outside of the raid campaign, the portal for now, it's not great. The mid-season update might be a great time to come in. You might see some discounts for the expansion at some point around then. It might not be a big discount, but it'd probably be better than nothing. But the grind right now, it really does reward spending time more so than it does challenging yourself, which is what I think most people want to do. Again, this system is new, so maybe Bungie's just figuring out what works, but right now, to me, this doesn't feel 100% what I wanted it to be, or what I thought it was going to be, which might be my fault a little bit, but it was advertised as challenge yourself as much as you want, and when you do that, you're going to get more rewards, which is technically true, but you, again, can't go beyond a certain threshold. And to add the fact that you can go spend 10 to 15 minutes in mythic missions, killing a bullet sponge, that doesn't really give you a whole lot of rewards. It's not great. So yeah, the campaign, the raid, it gives me hope that there's somewhere down the line where Bungie puts all of it together. They make the portal the best it can be, and they're bringing back the destination tab. This is the last thing I'm going to show in this review, I promise. Just look at this. Look at what they did. I mean, they're going to reverse this and start updating the destinations tab, which is now the world tab. It looks so dreary. They toned down the saturation on it. It's so sad. You have all of this content, right? All of these planets, all these activities, and granted, most of this is again integrated into the portal, but you have these raids here, you have dungeons, I mean, some of these exotic missions, like Whisper is in there, but Seraph Shield isn't for now. Neither is 0 Hour. You could put dares in there. I mean, there's so much content here, and you could even put old raids in the portal. And having a raid thing here would be awesome. And I'm gonna go on a boomer rant, but in D1, before D2 came out, we had the Age of Triumphs, and it had a weekly featured raid, quite similar to how we had a pinnacle raid of the week. But they could do something like that. Say you get, you know, new armor sets from doing that raid, or completing it in a certain amount of time, or with certain modifiers on, and they might be planning something like that in the future, so maybe I'm just clairvoyant, but people would eat that up, and it would give people a reason to play old raids. And when I tell you, yeah, people want to play the new raid, and it's gonna give you good rewards, and there is a reason to do that. But not using the world tab and everything that's in there is such a loss, because again, that is the problem with the portal right now. There's no variety, and you just have to go one tab over and you have so much variety. It's insane. Destiny is a game, regardless of how much you play it, you're gonna replay the same things again at some point. It's literally the nature of a live service game. But managing how much you do that is important for the long-term health of the game, because the more I'm doing Encore, the faster I'm gonna burn out. Anyway, I'm done talking for now. You can tell I'm pretty passionate about this, and listen, it does come from a place of love. A lot of people who don't play the game anymore maybe criticize it because they see the potential, they know it's there, they want it to be better. Sometimes you get so hateful though when you're on that train, and I get it. You might hate Bungie, you might hate the game, and that's fair. I'm not trying to say you shouldn't, but yeah, I do see the positives, and I have to enjoy those positives, because the story is truly great. The raid is amazing, and yeah, I just wish everything else was, so I could sit here and tell you to spend the 40 bucks, and it'll be the best money you've ever spent, right? You'll get twice the amount of hours you'll get from the $40 that you spent. You'll get 80 hours worth of gameplay and so on. But I can't say that, and I'm not gonna lie. And yeah, waiting again, best option. And I'm gonna talk in circles if I keep going. So I'll see you guys in the next one.